Welcome back.
Welcome back to Renegades of the podcast. Thank you guys for joining us.
I'm Juliet. This is Remy.
That's right.
We are Unheard Sirens.
Incorporated. Yes. It is Renegades of the podcast. So thank you guys for joining us on this very self-reflective episode. We enjoyed hashing this out with you guys. Now we're going to go into
Perfect.
One of our
album.
One of our new segments. Yes.
Dummy.
Perfect. Hold on.
I've been waiting for a year. Okay.
I'm just teeing up. Got it.
I've been waiting for a year. They have to know. I have been waiting for a year.
So on this segment, perfect albums. These are albums that we consider to be perfect. So each of us in this segment is going to select an album that we think is like 10 out of 10. No skips. It's all amazing, all killer, no filler. That's a Sum 41 album. We will not be talking about that one because I'm not a fan of that. But anyway, so yeah, we're talking about perfect albums on this segment. Take it away. You already did, but go ahead. Continue. What is the album?
Dummy, the first album by Portishead.
Their debut. Okay, nice.
Their debut album, yeah. And they have 3 full-length albums of original material. They have one big live concert album, live in Roseland in New York. They have a number of, really a lot of remixes and soundtrack material that they've done and some singles. All the members of Portishead have done side projects, side albums, side singles, EPs. There's a huge body of work when you get into the artists behind Portishead, but as the band Portishead, Dummy was their debut album. Did you look up exactly which year it released? Was it like 94 or 95?
It was 94.
94, yeah. So Dummy was released in 1994. Portishead is in northwest coast of England. I drove through it.
Nice.
And I was like, Portishead! Yes! Driving south back from
is that actually
Glasgow.
Like the name of a town?
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Cool.
Actual name of a town. It's a place.
Nice.
Portishead's
Gotcha.
a place.
Ah.
Yeah, because I was driving from Glasgow down towards Wales. And
so they're like Chicago or Europe or Asia
Boston,
or other bands named after places.
Mm-hmm.
I did not know that.
Yeah. And Beth Gibbons is the singer in Portishead, and then Jeff Barrow is like the main, I think, guitar player, composer guy. I love that on Dummy they also have someone scratching, which was like a big thing that was coming over because they're this genre. Portishead is trip hop. Trip hop was taking some of the kind of psychedelic dance stuff that was happening in the electronic music scene and the synthwave music of the time, the 80s into the early 90s, and hip-hop influences and jazz influences. Mm-hmm. So you have a lot of jazz stylings, and Beth Gibbons' vocals are very, very jazz influenced. You can hear a lot of Billie Holiday, Etta James, and all the old, like, beautiful songstresses of the blues and jazz movement. But then you have someone that's like, spinning and scratching the records in the background that's coming from hip hop and, all the stuff that was happening with breakdancing and like people on the streets, just like scratching and making music. So underneath the music, you have a lot of subtle influences, and yet it kind of comes together in a way that's very haunting. It's very atmospheric, very ambient. And then Beth's vocals are so emotional, and she's just sort of like crying out with her humanity and what she's going through. And I can't, I've studied voice, did a bachelor's and a master's degree in music, and, studied a lot. And I can't always make out all the words that she's saying. If I know all the words, it's because I've usually had to look it up and have someone help me out. So I would not say she has like the top diction in the world, but I think she is one of the best emotional conveyors of meaning. It's like you feel what she's feeling, even if you can, it's just syllables, but you get it. You get what is coming through in the music. And it's just, it's exquisite. And, the first band I founded was Phoenix Noir that I founded in 2008, and we have an album that's out and live online. You can find it everywhere that music exists, and our album is called From the Ashes, and we would refer to Phoenix Noir genre as trip rock because we didn't have anyone scratching. It didn't have as many of the same, like hip hop. It didn't have any pre-recorded elements we weren't sampling. And that's something trip hop was sampling and having people scratching live and having a lot of jazz and blues influence, which were all part of the influences of hip hop. and what I was doing in Phoenix Noir was all live instruments, and we were very influenced by like alt rock and like heavier, harder stuff, and like goth and dark wave and industrial were influences along with trip hop and along with a lot of the same musical influences that Beth Gibbons might have. I have like with the old jazz and blues singers and things like Annie Lennox and Kate Bush, and those vocalists were like, and Beth were deeply, deeply, deeply inspiring to me. So we would say with Phoenix Noir that it was more trip rock because it had that trip hop element, and I don't think I can ever make music that's not been influenced by Portishead. I'm incapable. Like if you take Portishead away, I don't know who I am anymore. Like it is so part of me.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I just there's no me without Portishead. Like there just isn't. It is the most foundational band in my world, and it has been since 1994. I heard the album for the first time, and I was just like jaw on floor. Like this is the most perfect, amazing, exquisite music ever. And like I have just listened to it so many times, and I've listened to all their material, but for sure, far and away, the tightest album with never a bit missed. I love every single second of it. Is Dummy.
Yeah.
And I'm not, the other ones haven't grabbed me as deeply. My second favorite is actually the Live at Roseland, which has some of the stuff from the second album was the one that they named Portishead. So the album is Portishead, the band is Portishead. It's the eponymous or self-named album. And Dummy, as the debut, was not named after the band. And a lot of times that's flipped. But anyway, so the second album, it still has a lot of really good music that I'm really into, but nothing has ever spoken to me as deeply as Dummy as like a body of work. It's very, very just clearly in there. It's in my psyche. It's in my soul. And I feel like it, people used to say it was like the best music to like, be with the person that you care about and get your groove on, what I'm saying? Saying a little something.
Do what mommies and daddies do. Yes.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of little people in the world that be like, Mom and Dad, how did I end up here? And Mom and Dad's answer, or maybe Mom and their friend donated or whatever, Dad and Dad. But anyway, the answer in a lot of cases of like, how did the next generation get here is, Portishead. Yeah. I mean, it is, and I don't know, I'm not obsessed with sex and, fornication. Of course, it's wonderful. Like sensuality and romance and connection.
A little bit of sexiness.
But in the music.
There's nothing wrong with it, baby.
I know, right? But it's funny because it's like so like just the music that I adore is really sexy.
Yeah.
And it's not like everything I ever do and everything that I'm all about is always like, it's got to be so sexy. Like, that's just,
It just reminded me of like a TikTok meme thing that I participated in with Synthwave artists. There was like this trending sound of like, here's what your favorite one of these, blank, says about you. And the first one was like metal bands or whatever. And like, it's the sound effect, and you can put your own video over it for whatever you want. It's like, you're choosing the safest one. Oh, you just chose this one to be clever. Blah, blah, blah. One of the ones he said is like, is this one your favorite because it's good, or are you just really horny?
Yes. So in the case of Dummy, it's really good. And it's really good if you're really horny.
There you go.
But it's just really good. And also, it's really good if you want to get your groove on.
Maybe you know this, maybe you don't. Was this the first to do trip hop, or did trip hop exist before this album, before Portishead? They invent the genre, or did they just, help popularize it?
Yeah, I mean, that there's going to be people that can go so deep into like dream house and jungle and electronica and then goth and trip hop and hip hop and club music. Like, these things are very fluid, and they're always creators in certain places.
But I'm wondering because
I don't know that they coined the term, but
that's the thing, is like
they became the center of the scene.
Because what you said, that's so obvious, the scratching and the lo-fi and the boom bap kind of 90s hip hop influence, but I don't know, did it exist before then of like people using the scratching and that influence but not rapping over it? Right. But using it for other type of music that is also, like you said, very like jazz influenced and like, it's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure, because there were other bands sort of occupying the trip hop space, and people were kind of coming up together. And a lot of times you don't know that a label's going to be applied to you, and you're going to be part of a scene. Like, you're just starting to create music. You know, but there's other bands like Morshiba, which was another English band, and Sneaker Pimps, also English band.
Yeah.
So like the scene was kind of emerging, I guess, from what people were experimenting with, like club and house and lo-fi and all kinds of things were kind of just, people were spinning things, they were over layering things, you know, because when I've seen Portishead live, like they have, you know, they'll have a DJ or they'll have someone that's scratching like live. So there's a lot of the live mixing aspects. So I feel like it was emerging from things that were happening in the club scene, things that were happening in the rave scene, things that were happening on the dance floors. And that was like underground first, before people knew these words or these terms, before they knew the word rave or before they called things trip hop or whatever. And, you know, I'm not deep enough in the knowledge to make any claims to like, were they the first or anything. I would doubt it.
I'm just curious.
We're usually kind of all finding our way, and we all hear a little something. Probably somebody else had the inspiration to start there, and then they heard it. They're like, yes. But, you know, Hooverphonics started coming, as far as I'm aware, maybe got popular a little after Portishead was in the space. And then if you listen to, I've listened to a ton of amazing YouTube DJs that are out there that make these trip hop playlists that are like 2 and 3 hours long. And there is a ton of music in it. And a lot of it does not have strong vocals. A lot of it is about the layering and the kind of ambient, the vibe of it, like lo-fi. And right now, you can listen to lo-fi for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. And like the little chick is on the bed with the cat and they're just studying. And
they just, as of this recording, they just started, the people who do the lo-fi girl with the cat just started another channel with a synthwave boy who's in the same position, but it's like neon colors.
I love it, and I have had it on like so much. The girl and her cat. Sometimes it's snowing. Sometimes she's like doing homework. Sometimes she's on the bed. It's like, what will she and the cat be doing, listening to their lo-fi? And I've listened to a lot of trip hop playlists trying to widen my awareness of all the bands that are part of it, and there's a massive number of bands, and a ton of them were not with really strong vocalists and didn't have any pop singles that are going to, you know, get really, really big and get really, really well known. Whereas Portishead did, Hooverphonic did, Morshiba did. They were very like vocal led. They were vocal driven. They were hooky. There's a lot of like vocal earworms too, that, you know, like what they're going to be doing. And then there's tons of other stuff considered trip hop that's more ambient and that doesn't have at least as strong a play of the vocals. I guess Massive Attack was one of the other ones. With Portishead, then Massive Attack started getting really, really huge on the scene, and Tricky was doing stuff with Massive Attack and then on his own. And, you know, I saw a lot of these bands live in the late 90s because I was a DJ and I had an underground radio show called The Energy Eclectic on WQFS FM 90.9, Guilford College radio station in North Carolina. And my Energy Eclectic was like anything that gives me energy, and it's going to be eclectic, y'all. And so it was all these different genres. But I kind of tried to anchor the like electronica, underground, goth, synth sound for the station. Like that was kind of a niche I was trying to make sure we had good coverage amongst the different DJs that were working at the station at that time. So it was a little bit, you know, my focus, but occasionally I would go do other things that are influences on me. Like I would get into like a little headspace where I'm playing Tori Amos and Tom Waits and Nick Cave and some of the other stuff that I really, really love. That's very genre different than this, you know, so I was kind of flow in and out, but luckily I was able to see Portishead live. I got to see them play in Atlanta, and then I got to see them, a decade later, I got to see them play in Asbury Park, New Jersey, about 10 years ago now. They've only played in the U.S., like, as far as I'm aware, they only have played shows in the U.S. like 3 times, ever. Wow. And each time they only played a couple shows, like 2 or 3 shows total. You know, they've never done a huge tour. They've, you know, almost never played it in the States. So I'm pretty psyched that as a super fan, I was able to see them 2 of the 3 times that I'm aware of. I could have missed something because I'm not, you know, all researching down the rabbit holes on all this stuff. But as far as I'm aware, there were 3 times that I know that they played in the States, and I got 2 of the times I got to see them. And had to travel a good ways to do it. I was not based in Georgia or New Jersey either time, and just traveled to get to see them. And that was absolutely amazing. But I also got to see Tricky. He toured with Lollapalooza in the late 90s. He was, you know, he was doing some stuff separate from Massive Attack at that point. I got to see Morshiba with their original vocalist, Sky, and she has a solo career. Sky is amazing. They have another vocalist that they're still working with, still releasing music, that's definitely trying to kind of be herself, but be a little bit Sky, because people really loved the vocals in Morshiba, because it's 2 white dudes with a beautiful black woman singing, and they make gorgeous music together. There's just that jazz, the African American, British African heritage of jazz and blues that comes through, and the vocalist from Roshiba being British African descent is a part of that band's character that I love and I really, really appreciate. Like Hooverphonic is extremely white, and Portishead is all white people, but Portishead was very, very influenced by hip hop and by jazz and blues, and so it feels to me a little more inclusive racially in terms of the cultural and racial heritage of the music that they created. It takes all those influences and serves it back up in their own way, but I feel a lot in there. Yeah. Whereas something like Hooverphonic to me feels more like it comes from a country that's never had people of color live there. Like it just different. Oh, yeah, totally. And it's still kind of fun. I mean, I like Hooverphonic. And I've seen them. And a modern band that reminded me a bit of Hooverphonic is Phantogram. Like that's more of a modern, like you see people that are very influenced by some of these earlier bands doing a new thing now. And I would say Phantogram is one of those that seems to me like continuing the lineage. Yeah. I've always hoped that I am continuing the Portishead lineage with Phoenix Noir. Yeah. And one time I came off stage with Phoenix Noir, and I never played a Phoenix Noir show without a Portishead cover. Like never. Yeah, that's what the one. And somebody said at the end, they said, "This is as close as I'll ever get." Another one of the musicians we were playing with that night said, "This is as close as I'll ever get to seeing Portishead live. Thank you." And I was like, "Oh, you have touched my very soul. What a compliment." If I can do them like the honor of hopefully Phoenix Noir will create another album. We had to take a pause with the pandemic, and this time I want to do a Portishead cover from one of the tracks from Dummy with Phoenix Noir. Maybe one day Unheard Sirens would do it. Yeah. Who knows? Yeah, it's obviously my exposure to Portishead is mainly through you. So like I've heard this album like a couple times and really taken it in for this podcast, and of course the few of the tracks stuck out to me because I've heard you and Phoenix Noir perform them several times. Like Glory Box, I've heard several times because you used to perform that all the time. I think was it Wandering Stars? The other one I've heard a bunch because I think you've had it on playlists and stuff. But one thing that Strangers
stuck out
another one I used to cover all the time.
What I love that this album to my ear, it does like when. Again, my scope of trip hop is pretty limited, but what I know that trip hop sound, which is basically to me, it's like hip hop without the rap. It's like the hip hop influence, but like more like singing and something more like the jazz influence. So to me, this album is like trip hop, like encapsulated into one album. Like this is the epitome of trip hop for me personally, and maybe it is for other people as well. So. But yeah, I love that. Like again, because I'm not a huge hip hop person, but like the hip hop I do like and love is all from kind of like that early to kind of mid '90s is mostly where it's coming from. A bit from the 2000s, but mostly like that '90s like that sound, and so I can hear those influences very clearly, and it's really cool to hear that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it is totally like a there. It's not to say that all the tracks are like too similar, but like there's variation here and there, and there's some that feel a little more like I guess ballady or whatever. But yeah, it there is a consistency though to the sound. There is a straight vibe that goes all the way through the entire thing. That's very present. It can. For lack of like better reference point, but like the jazz influence just feels very smooth, clubby, like Jessica Rabbit to me. It is that smooth, sultry, sexy thing, but with the hip hop spinny like edge to it. So it's like taking the jazz. It's like 30s, but like here's a dash of 90s for you into the dash of 90s, hip hop culture into the mix, and it totally works and so cool. And
they're doing it with electric guitars and then electric bass that's live. And so you've also got like sounds with the amplifiers. Like they really play a lot with the feedback sounds and the kinds of electronic instrument sounds that are possible to make. And especially seeing them live, I can see them like they're manipulating, with pedals and amps, and they've got all kinds of gear and equipment, and it's like only a couple people on stage, but it's full of gear. And, I think there were legends of like Jeff Barrow like trying to find people that could like press something new on wax because he couldn't find it anywhere. He was trying to find people that still made records to get sounds he wanted to have as a record sound because you need that needle scratchy, in there. And it wasn't, and he couldn't, trying to like get that done to make new stuff that sounds old and it's brand new because you can't find anybody else that created what it is you want to sample. So then you're like building it all like from scratch and having to still find people that like make records in the 90s, like press wax. It wasn't very common at that time. It had gone out of vogue. Everything was CDs and tapes, cassette tapes and CDs.
Whereas now it's kind of come back around. Most music collectors like collect vinyl. There's a whole like subsection.
Yeah, there's a resurgence of people saying, if you're really, really cool
but,
and indie, you're going to have your own vinyl. But like it had really faded out into the mid 90s. It was the least popular.
Cassettes and CDs.
Yeah.
And then mostly CDs as you got later in the decade.
Yeah. Until everything disappeared and now we just stream things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was like so cool to see all the gear and equipment and, the people that are spinning and helping to create these sounds. And then these just like couple of very, very emotionally intense instrumentalists. Like you could see that everybody was like really super into this music. I mean, so into it.
You talking about the crowd or the
musicians and the crowd. Oh my God, yes, all of it. And I think they started playing the Glastonbury Festival in the UK quite a lot. So they were very, we have bands that got very huge in the US because they were doing Lollapalooza and some of the big festival things. And in the UK, Portishead was pretty massive and people traveling from all over the world to get to the Glastonbury Festival because they were playing there a lot for a while. And they've done some guest appearances where they've played again for benefits for various things. And then at Glastonbury sometimes. I will say I have a fun story from seeing them for the first time.
Go ahead.
Can I tell my story?
Yep.
So I went to see them in Atlanta, and I was with like my two best friends from college, Natalia and Ben, and we got there like 12 hours ahead of the show because it was standing room only and no seats, no assigned seating. So like I wanted to be the first person in line. So there were like only two people in line in front of us. And the queue was forming for like close to 8 hours, and but I was there like 12 hours early because I was very serious. Like I was going to be right against the stage. Like no one was getting between me and my Portishead. Like it was serious, and and we would take turns to like go get food or use the bathroom or go look at a shop because it was like in a really, really cool hip area. In Atlanta. So there was stuff to look at, but we had to take turns because it was like, no, we got to hold our place in line, guys. They're like, okay, Juliet, okay. And so the doors open and literally people flood the stage. I mean, rush. Like it was like crazy trailer trash in America with a big sale on something at Walmart on Black Friday and somebody getting trampled to death. It was like that level of seriousness. It was like that level serious. People were like, I gotta sit at the stage. So we got right against the stage, and we're just over by the massive speakers just to the left, and we're like just down from them so we can get a really clear view across the stage of all of the musicians. And Beth Gibbons is incredibly shy. Incredibly shy. She is terrified of crowds and interviews. They got the cover of Rolling Stone, and she had such social anxiety and panic about being interviewed for that she never made it to the interview, and they lost the cover. And so there were the reviews of the music and people talking about them and how amazing they were, but they never got the cover. Like she blew it because she was petrified. Wow. She couldn't deal. And you could see her stage fright, but if you think like Jim Morrison was famously terrified at first and then got out of his whatever inhibitions and became a complete exhibitionist performer, right? Like this guy. And
I mean, Bowie created Ziggy Stardust and did characters because he was terrified.
Yeah. So you have a lot of introverts that are deep creatives, and yet the stage presence, interacting with the audience or even interacting with people going to interview you about your work, can be terrifying. So Beth is in that category, and she had like a little stool behind her, and like Jim Morrison's first shows, he performed with his back to the audience. He couldn't even turn around. They just said, get on stage and start getting used to being a performer and that you are on stage, but you don't even have to look at him. Just get up there, and he like did the whole show with his back to the audience. She felt to me like she would prefer to do that, but she did turn and face us. But she kept her eyes closed the whole time. And this is very early days for Portishead. They were touring. They're maybe just about. I think I saw them in probably '97 or '98 in Atlanta. I think they were just releasing the second album, which came pretty close on the heels of the first, and then it was like years before the third one happened. They did a lot of that solo project and collaboration and soundtrack stuff in between. But these 3 albums, it was a long time before the third one. But 1 and 2 went pretty quickly. I think this was the tour for the second album, self-titled Portishead album. But they were definitely still doing a lot of the W material, which had gotten so huge. And she would whip around at the end of every song and just drink her water bottle. And she was like, you know, kind of just hunched in on herself. Like, I want to disappear. Oh my God, I'm back in my body. Like, and then she'd go into the song and it was just like emotion, expression, like channeling the force of longing, channeling love, channeling heartbreak.
Nice.
You know, bursting out of her with her eyes closed, and it's just like, wow. And then it would stop and she's like snap back in her body and be like, oh shit, I'm still in front of people. Oh my God, I hate this. And she'd turn around and just drink her water. And then and like one time in the night, and people would say, Beth, we love you. It's okay. We're glad you're here. Like, people were like yelling reassurance at her the whole show. Aww. Like, every time it would stop, I wish I had like a bootleg recording from like my, you know, Walkman in my pocket or something, but I don't. Because it was so sweet. Everyone's like, we love you. Every time it would stop, like, it's okay, Beth. We're so glad you're here. Yeah. And one time she turns around and she says, I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit croaky. And it was like, oh, she was a little bit croaky. And she was a little bit croaky. But not when she sang. She sounded like a goddess. She sounded like a dream. She smokes heavily. She smokes on stage. So she is going to be a little bit croaky because, you know, she's a smoker and deals with that. But, you know, I love Glory Box. Like, that's the top song for me, which is why I covered it so much. You know, I just want to be a woman. You know, just want to be a woman. Like a full
and that's probably
powerful.
That's the epitome of that sexiness you talk about. Those lyrics and the way she's singing the whole
powerful. So like that's the one I've covered the most. I've covered a number of the songs, but that's the one I've done the most time. Yeah. And you know, I'm so tired of playing with this bow and arrow like Cupid trying, you know. It's like it's just so powerful. So she was singing it, and she had her eyes closed the whole show. This was the last song, or right before encores, or maybe it was the encores, I don't know. She had all night to, you know, get as comfortable as she was ever going to get. And I'm standing right in front of the huge speaker. I mean, I'm like right on the floor. The speaker's up above me, but I'm against the rail. And she's right on my left, and the huge speaker's on my right. There's no one in front of me. So I was singing my heart out. I was just singing the top of my lungs because there's this massive stack and I'm not bothering anybody. Nobody else can even hear me sing, you know. And I had my eyes closed because I was just with her, you know, and I'm just singing every word. And I opened my eyes and look at her, and she had her eyes open and was watching me. And she had and we were just connected, and she had been watching me. And then I was like, oh, I'm such a dork. I'm such a mega fan, and you're watching me watch you lose. Like, I'm so into it. And I'd like sort of forgotten I wasn't alone in my room singing my heart out, you know. It was like that kind of thing. And then you're like, oh God. Oh God. Oh, and it's this person I admire so much is like watching me geek out, watching her and singing her song. And so I just go, nah. And I was like, oh my God, did the Brits do this like the Americans do? Because I was just like, oh, you caught me.
Yeah.
I love what you're saying. And then I was like, oh, I am such a dork. I am the biggest dork ever. And I was so humiliated. I was like, oh, my hero just was watching me. Why not did I do it?
Yeah.
And I'm such a dork. And so then at the end of the song, she did not flip around. She stayed with her face to the audience, and it was right near the end. So it was either like applause, and then there was going to be encores, or that was the encores, and there was mega applause. I can't remember. But everybody was just going crazy. Because that whole audience was so into them the whole night. And the song was amazing. And she just stays, you know, she stays face forward. And she finally like looked back at me again, and then she went, and I was like, oh, she just gave me the thumbs up back. I am not the biggest dork ever. Beth Gibbons just gave me the thumbs up after I'm like, I love your music. So yeah, that's like one of my favorite moments of all time. Hilarious. So I've been waiting till that's
awesome.
Yep. So if she ever sees this, like, I'm that kid in the 90s that was like, I love you. And then she was like,
I wonder if she's told that
she
story.
Remember?
Like, yeah.
You know,
Who knows?
I mean, they've done tons of work, not just as Portishead, but each of them as artists has done a lot of work, and so they've been performing. You know, it would be so amazing if by any chance you remember that moment. But for me, it's like one of my favorite music moments of all time, because when it's like your top band, their top favorite song for you, you're like right there with them, and they know it, and they see you, and you are a dork, and you give them a thumbs up like a complete freaking dork, and then you feel like I want to melt into the floor like Amelie when she turns into tears and just melts. I felt like that. I was like, oh, I am so ashamed. I'm such a nerd. And then she like returned it, and I was like, maybe I'm not such a nerd. No, I am a nerd, but she's a nerd too. Or whatever. You know, it was okay then. It was okay. Even though I had all those feelings and very strong feelings because I was just like, I was so hardcore in my fandom about all of it. Yeah. And I still am.
I can't. I definitely probably would have done the same thing in your situation. I've had several dorky moments, which we won't come into now. But anyway.
Maybe in a future episode.
Maybe in a future episode. But nothing like that.
But I mean, imagine if you got to see Bowie and he got he noticed you like geeking out and like having your Bowie-ness, and then was like,
that would be totally. That would be.
It was like it's equivalent of that moment for me.
I've had a moment similar to that on like a Warped tour where I was watching him, and I felt like he was looking me straight in my eyes, and I was just like, it was kind of weird like that. But I didn't.
What was it? Who was it?
It was Will Francis from Aiden.
Aiden. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, it was that was the Warped tour that Bryce went with me to see. Anyway,
our dear friend Bryce.
That was cool. But anyway, back to Portishead. Why would you say this album is like a perfect album? Like no skips. Why would you say it's like that it's like 10 out of 10 perfect?
It goes way beyond language. I have no words for why it is so perfect. It's just my perfect album. I have listened to this album for hundreds, if not thousands of hours of this album, you know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I love it every single time. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like one time I was trying to introduce my friend Joanna Arroyo when I lived in New Mexico to Portishead, and she didn't really know them because she had been really kind of out in the rock world, and she loved Pink Floyd, and we both were doing music together in the New Mexico State University School of Music. And she was like, wait, make me a mix of your favorite Portishead. And I was like, it has to be this one, and this, and that, and that, and it had to be two full 90-minute tapes to make a, like, here's how you needed to get to know Portishead. It was almost everything they'd ever released. It was like, I couldn't take anything off. But I did rearrange things, and I went to the live versions, and I had some of the stuff from, like, they worked with Jim Jarmusch and did some music for his films, and there's sort of soundtrack and rare things that I'd found, and, you know, so I was mixing it all, but I was like, it took 2 90-minute mixtapes for me to, like, give a new good friend who seriously wanted to know why they were so awesome, like, here's why. It's 3 full hours of their music. So it's just, you know, I drop into that vibe, and it takes me someplace I've always wanted to be, and it lets me stay there. And it's just always been that way. And it's never lessened over time. Like, I love them just as hard as the first time. You know, and I remember, like, the exact night when someone played the album Dummy for me, and I was just like, mind explode. Right. Like, somebody has created the perfect work of art. Oh, my God. Mm-hmm. I can try to create work the rest of my life, and I can only hope to, like, create little moments of this, you know, maybe a song. If I ever created an album that felt like they feel to me, like if I could feel that way to one other person on this planet, I definitely would feel like my life purpose was fulfilled. It was just like, it just answers a question I can never stop asking. I don't know. I do not have language for why this album is so important to me and so perfect for me. It just is.
No, that makes sense. That the perfect albums are genuinely like that, and I definitely have a few on my list. I know you have more on your list that we're going to cover in our perfect album segment in the future.